I could tell the moment that I saw him, he was nothing but the troublemaking kind.
I'm Mark Steele, and in this series I'm returning to some of the people and the places that I've come across before who've played a part in trying to change the world. And this week I'm visiting my old South London council estate and going back to Belfast and doing a show there. In the 1980s, you could get very frustrated at how little most people knew about Ireland. For example, I remember going to Dublin and my mum said, "Well, you be careful if you're going to Ireland." And I said, "Well, look, Mother, the south of Ireland hasn't been at war since 1921. And she said, "Yes, well, just be careful, that's all I'm saying." Like if someone was going on a holiday to Spain and you said, "Well, don't go swimming because if the Armada catch you, that'll be a lot." Maybe it shouldn't be surprising, though, that most English people were confused by Ireland, because not only did we used to run the place, we in fact used to run the whole world. Because I know England doesn't do quite the same damage as it has done in the past, but we're still being patronising. That's what we do, especially to the south now. It's all that sort of, "Oh, we love Ireland, we love it all with your diddly-dee music and your cors, and we love all that." It's rubbish, isn't it? And with a river dance, we love all that. Irish people don't move like that. I know that. Dublin's a major modern European city. They can't build that up without moving their arms. And we've got this off the Americans, this thing of like everything's lovely if it's Irish, it's all lovely. I was talking to this American woman and she was going, "Oh, I'm so excited because I'm 70 years old and I've just been to Ireland for the first time, which is so exciting for me because I'm Irish myself," you said. And you just want to grab them and go, "Look, if you're 70 and you're Irish, how can you just have been to Ireland for the first time? Being from somewhere and having been there once, these are two separate things." Are all bloody Americans like this who get the two confused? Does Neil Armstrong go around saying, "I'm from the moon, you know"? England thinks it's the empire and we used to run everything and we should still be running things. So even in the Olympics, any athlete anywhere in the world who's done for drug taking, then we go, "It's an outrage, they should stamp it out and banish them and throw them away" and stuff. But if an English gets done, they just go, "Oh, I can't understand, it must be this natural condition I've got where my sweat turns into ecstasy." After I became a young socialist, bit by bit, I changed my attitude towards gays and strippers and other issues, but not really Ireland. That just seemed like a simple matter. The trouble was caused by the IRA, who were evil, and that was it. Until I read a book called War in an Irish Town by Eamon McCann, who was one of the founders of the civil rights movement in Ireland. When I was in Belfast recently, I went to meet Eamon, but unfortunately he was in London at the time, so I had to meet him when I got back.
Well, when I grew up in Derry, one of the first things you learned, I mean, quite literally at your mother's knee, was that in Derry, we, the people from the Bogside, would never get a job with the local council, for example. I mean, the council was based in Derry Guildhall. There wasn't a single Catholic working in Derry Guildhall. I mean, not even as a cleaner. They just weren't allowed into the place, despite the fact that 2/3 of the population of the city were Catholics, that the city council had a permanent inbuilt unionist majority, despite the fact that unionists were a 1/3 minority in the city, and there seemed to be very little that you could do about this. There was no constitutional mechanism available for challenging this. So the civil rights movement began to go onto the streets, and when it went onto the streets, of course, I mean, it was met by the full wrath of the RUC, which battered it off the streets.
What we need is a little monster.
I started reading loads of stuff about Irish history, about the exporting of potatoes during the famine and the brutality of the black and tans, and I kept thinking, I've never been told about all this. It was like finding out that your partner's been having a secret affair. Except even with the sneakiest affair imaginable, if you asked how long it had been going on, you'd be very surprised if they said 800 years since the invasion of Henry II. And then I got really stupid and started learning the words to these daft Irish Republican songs like The Boys of the Old Brigade and stuff about James Connolly, and songs that seemed to have choruses like "Declan O'Donnell, that brave son of Ireland, was slain by a musket in 1804, and the spot where he lay we still call today the Declan O'Donnell Carpets, Tiles and Bathroom Accessories Store."
National's a very heady sort of a thing, you know. People get very excited about it, you know, and it's full of romance, and it's full of symbols from the past, and it's full of good songs, you know, celebrating our Irishness, you know, sort of like the armed wing of Riverdance almost, you know. You know, and I never thought that was going to lead to radical change in Ireland, and I think I was right.
One of the things I remember about when I first came to Belfast, the classic thing you do, sort of, especially as a young idealist who'd read about how appallingly the Catholics were treated and so on, I remember wandering around and thinking, yeah, look at all the boarded up houses and how awful it is and rubble everywhere, and then realising that without knowing it, I'd strolled into a Protestant area and it was just as dreadful. So, for example, now I'm in one of the main loyalist areas, the bottom of the Shankill Road, and right in front of me here at the edge of a huge house, I don't know what the people living in the house think of it, there is an enormous mural which has got, this is Sinn Féin's commitment to the peace process. Quite witty, because then it's got 4 pictures, one of which, for example, is a Statue of Liberty where the statue's holding a gun and it says guns from Florida. Oh, well, we've been joined now by a couple of people who are taking pictures. Maybe it'll become a big tourist attraction and sort of it'll be a place where people come and go, oh, take some pictures. They'll show you holiday snaps. This is me and Terry in front of the giant red hand of Ulster. Oh, the weather was dreadful that day. The question that's so puzzling is, what are the loyalists loyal to? The Crown? There's no logic to the royal family. So when the Queen Mother died, I remember all these people coming on, one of them come on, royal people, and said, oh, and she was always wore the most wonderful array of hats. I thought, of course she wears a wonderful array of hats. She's got about 1 million, billion, trillion quid. She's the Queen Mother. She's not going to turn up to Ascot with a bobble hat with Derby County written on it. She's the Queen Mother. It's just nuts. You're born and you're royal. It just makes no sense. Well, you must know there is a law that the head of the royal family must not marry a Catholic. What's that for? Are they afraid that if they relax that rule that the Queen would run off with Gerry Adams? Laugh though, wouldn't it? Further to an announcement concerning proceedings at the Assembly, there is something I would like to add concerning relations between Her Majesty and myself. And you could have a little commemorative plate. The Queen and Jerry with a balaclava and a little tiara. Then came the issue of the hunger strikes. Prisoners who were members of political organisations had originally had what was known as political status, but this was then taken off them and they were reclassified as common criminals along with burglars. So they refused to wear their prison clothes and wore just a blanket, and then they went on hunger strike. The first hunger striker was Bobby Sands, who as a young boy had been firebombed out of his house in a Protestant estate. And during the hunger strikes I came to Andersontown, one of the most Republican areas of Belfast. Almost every house had pictures of the hunger strikes in their windows, and all day there were protests and young boys painting murals, and every car was tooting out of protest. And then Bobby Sands stood for Parliament.
It sent a fever through the nationalist people of Fermanagh and South Tyrone, and I think there was something like an 89% turnout in that election, or perhaps even more, perhaps into the 90s. And I think every single person who could have possibly be got to the polls that day got to the polls. And of course there were, it should be said, sort of there's another ancient Irish tradition, which is, if it's felt, it's less than 100% certain that somebody is going to turn out to the polls, to rule out the possibility of the vote not being cast by casting it for that person. There's a certain amount of that going on as well. Personation. Personation is an ancient Irish tradition in which if you don't personate in Irish elections, there isn't a fair result, because you can be quite certain that the other crowd are personating. You have to do it to level things up and make sure that the result is democratic.
Irish tradition, like playing the bloke playing violin at benefits, things like that. It's all part of that.
Indeed, yeah.
Astonishingly, Bobby Sands was elected, which seems remarkable now when it's believed that nobody can be elected unless they've been trained in moderate speaking and wearing the right suits. Imagine a new Labour agent presented with Bobby Sands' election campaign. Where would he start? Well, at least swap this tatty blanket for an Armani one. But now I'm going to somewhere that I didn't visit on the last occasion I was here, the head office of the Ulster Unionist Party, to meet Stephen King, an advisor to David Trimble, who I met recently during a peculiar gig in Dublin.
And the Protestant working class, knows fine rightly that it wouldn't have a welfare state if it wasn't for the fact that Northern Ireland's part of the United Kingdom. You go to a lot of places in Dublin, you'll see much, much worse poverty than you will in Belfast.
No, I agree. I think it's a very sharp weakness in the Republican argument, the idea of a 32-county version of the south of Ireland is not appealing at all.
No, that's it. I mean, James Connolly. I mean, I'm not a great fan of James Connolly, but James Connolly said that partition would cause a carnival of reaction, and to a large extent that was right.
Could I just say that I have now sat in the office of a Ulster Unionist advisor to David Trimble, and he's just been quoting James Connolly at me. I wonder if that's ever happened to anyone else. I think you should get one of those big James Connolly framed things there, and maybe one on this side of the proclamation and the double of Easter Rising. If I can get you one of them James Connolly things for the wall, and can you do us a quick chorus of Boys of the Old Brigade?
If you get me a James Connolly statue, I'll get you an Edward Carson statue, Mark.
Now, also, because you're also sort of active in the gay rights issue.
Yep.
Because that sort of suggests that there are other issues in Northern Ireland other than just the sort of Catholic Protestant issue, which I think most people in Britain, that's how you see it. It's just the one argument going on.
Things have changed. I mean, all sorts of other things are happening in society, changing in society. I mean, we've got an immigrant population now, which we were never really aware of.
There's a whole idea that the more people that come into a country, the worse off we are because we have to share everything out. But this doesn't make sense when you think about it, does it? Go back thousands of years, in cavemen times, there was only a couple of million people in the whole world. We must have been rich. We must have all been living in bling-bling caves with Versace mammoths. And I have to say, the proof of it is that in Ireland, there are so many people going, there's no room for the asylum seekers. Which is unbelievable, because Ireland is just about the one country in the world, as far as I know, that has got a smaller population now than it had 150 years ago. There's no room. It's a good job there was a famine then, isn't it? Otherwise the place would be tipping up. It's amazing, because anywhere you go in the world, I went to Iceland, right? First thing, in the high street, big Irish pub, loads of Irish. It was great, Everywhere, I'm sure you climb up Everest, you get 50 yards from the top. Would you like a little drink before you go to last your feet?
Wherever we go, we celebrate the land that makes us refugees.
There's the Gay Pride March every year in Belfast.
Yeah. Certainly 10 or 12 years ago, you'd have only got about 50 people on it. 2004, you can get about 3,000 people on it. I mean, that's a change in itself, that more people feel comfortable to go on such a march.
Couldn't you get all your lot from the Ulster Unionists on it? There's a march. Go on, just wear your sash as long as they colour coordinated. It'll look fantastic.
LOL 69, we're out, we're proud, and we're marching. Is that the idea?
It needs a few drums.
But I think it's other things that cause the conflict, and religion gets dragged into it. It's not religion what causes it. I don't think when some loyalists' kids were chucking stones at the Catholic area, they weren't thinking transubstantiation, mate, us. Though I have to say that when, in the space of 1 year, Joe Strummer, Nina Simone and Johnny Cash all die while Cliff Richard lives, that's got to be a sign there is no God. Brilliant thing about that joke is that me and the Protestants who laughed at it, 'cause that's just a laugh, but all the Catholics who laughed at it, you're going to burn in hell for eternity.
Walking back round places like Anderson Town now, it's obvious that there has been at least one big improvement, which is that there is now a ceasefire. But there is a frustrating side to the ceasefire, which is it seems to assume that everybody will forever identify themselves as Catholic or Protestant.
We used to have a joke in Northern Ireland, which was that, an atheist arrives in Northern Ireland and says, I'm an atheist, and is immediately asked, well, are you a Catholic atheist or a Protestant atheist? Now, this venerable old joke, is no longer a joke, because actually in the last census, in the 2001 census in Northern Ireland, if you wrote down that you were an atheist or a humanist or an agnostic, you were directed to a supplementary question, which was, from which community did you come? In effect, asking you, well, are you a Catholic atheist or a Protestant atheist? And I tried to find a place where I could write down that I'd come from a long line of atheists, but there was no provision in the census form.
On this trip to Belfast, I had pretty much the same feeling that I had the first time I went. Wandering about just makes you feel like one of these people that's always trying to matchmake their friends. You want to get working class Protestants and working class Catholics and go, you two, you've just got so much in common. Why don't you get together sometime?
Big Brother, right? A programme that I think is just unbelievable. How do you find that many people who can sit there talking about nothing day after day? But the one time it did get interesting was when there was a bloke cheating who had to be kicked out. And they had to find a replacement for him. And I remember thinking, God, because it was the same time as over here, there was one of these blokes that they call Mad Dog, that pop up every now and again. And they were desperate to put him in jail, and because of all the sensitivities of the ceasefire, they couldn't work out where to put him, which jail. And I thought, it's perfect! Replace him in the bin, it's perfect! It's fantastic, wouldn't it? Liven it up, wouldn't it? Who'd like to make their nominations?
After Belfast, the next place I visited was my old council estate in South London. I had been living in a filthy squat with a diagonal toilet and a room with no floorboards in a road of squats in which the weirdest things became normal. One night someone knocked on the door and said, can I borrow your wardrobe? I said, what for? He said, I need somewhere to put my pet owl.
But I was working at the time in a place that was just so typical of where you get shoved to an office job. And they'd be saying things like, do you know, last night it was 8:15 and the phone rang. Well, I turned to Edith, I said, who's that ringing at this time of night? And I'm thinking at 4:30 in the morning I was just dragging an armchair from a skip with a lunatic who was shouting like a werewolf to the moon because he was out of his box on mushrooms.
From there I went to a council flat on an estate that had started life during the post-war period, when the very existence of council flats must have filled people with hope. It's as if there was an agreement between the state and the residents. For winning the war, we'll provide decent houses as long as you promise to pay the rent and look after them.
Hello everybody, here I am in Mrs. Philpott's living room at Northholt. You've just heard my chief, Harold Macmillan, tell you that the People's House saves material. But it saves money too. Now let's meet Mrs. Philpott herself. Hello, Mrs. Philpott. Now after all, you've lived in this house for 9 months. What do you think about it?
Well, to live in a house like this is really a pleasure. This room, of course, is so beautifully big, and Veronica can dance around in it just as she likes. My little girl thinks it's simply wonderful.
Well, I'm delighted that Mrs. Philpott is happy. With a husband, a very pretty daughter, a budgigar, and above all a house in which to house them, we're not at all surprised she's happy.
If you went back there now, it'd probably go, and here is Veronica. Let's see how she's getting on. Oh, right, yeah, hello, man. I'm a bit screwed up at the minute, you know what I mean? Like, you couldn't let us score for some gear, could you? And how sweet. Veronica's still dancing around the living room, chasing imaginary bees. When I lived on the estate, the hope of the early days of council housing already seemed to be waning. The repairs were never done, and facilities such as the youth club and the library were being shut down. It was this housing office that was the one, and they would look on you with utter contempt. If you did ring up and get through to them, you would sort of ask, right, is the housing officer that was relevant to your particular estate, is he there? And they go, hang on, I'll see. And then you'd have that noise of like a phone that had just been left. And 10 minutes would go by, and then eventually someone would come back. No, he's not here. And I was always tempted to say, I think I did say a couple of times, is this bloke by any chance 3 inches tall? Because that would be the only possible explanation for how it's taken so long to verify whether he's there or not. Because you can see this housing office, it's about 20 feet long. And of course you know what's happened. Oh, not then. Leave it out, I'm eating an orange. I went to meet 2 of the people that lived in the flat just upstairs from me, Tim and Mickey. So I was one.
You were one.
And then there was the...
2 brothers were there next to them.
Yeah, that's it. And then a very nice Glaswegian woman.
Yeah, with her kids.
And then the coffin bloke.
Yeah.
Porno man.
Porno man. Because when the burglaries started,
absolutely,
I was in at number 1, and his was the first house to be burgled in this spate of burglaries, and a suitcase went flying out of the door that the burglars had sort of out of the window,
yeah.
And almost with sort of cartoon effect as it went thump, it shot open, almost as if it was animated, and all the magazines went pump and came out,
and the grass was just littered with all this porn, wasn't it?
Imagine the nightmare burglary in it, really. Not only you burgled, but your whole life's turned out.
Yeah. And he used to cough.
And
but
he's flapping Mac.
Yeah.
In fact, I couldn't speak to him after that. And after we realised that he had this secret life.
I have a perfectly good reason for that suitcase. That might not even been his suitcase.
What did happen to the suitcase?
Well, I mean, it was left in the middle of St Martin's estate. It just got ravaged. It might as well have. Isn't it? You might as well have got 150 vultures, chucked a dead mouse into it, and go, what happened to the mouse?
I started doing a bit of my act about the bloke who lived upstairs, who I called the Incredible Drilling Man, because he would just drill relentlessly any hour of the day or night he could start, with extraordinary tenacity. And it got to the point where I thought, well, he must have filled up all the walls and the ceiling by now. He must just be drilling random objects like tubes of toothpaste and potatoes, and his whole flat must just look like a giant dot-to-dot puzzle.
Then above me was the drilling man.
Yeah, John and Sonia.
Yeah.
Honeycomb flats.
Yeah.
But the strange thing was that when we went to Sonia and John's house, there was no evidence of drilling, was there?
None at all.
No.
And I think the only plausible explanation is that somehow he drilled his way through into a parallel universe.
But when a spate of burglaries happened, the residents of the block got together to demand that the council put in a door with an intercom. And when the council said that this would be too expensive, we organised a rent strike.
So how did it work? So we set up an account.
Oh, that was when the rent strike got going. Yeah, that was after the.
So we must have had a meeting after that meeting where we decided all together to start the rent.
And I remember sitting round on probably yours, and all the neighbours there again. And even that was such an odd thing, because all them years that we'd sort of been there quite a while, and no one had, hadn't been in anyone else's flat or anything like that.
But that was the fantastic thing about that meeting, wasn't it? Because we really didn't know each other. We didn't know each other from Adam.
No.
And we'd all sort of just come together, and we're all like looking at each other. As you go around someone's flat, you're kind of looking around a bit. Oh, this is that. They've got this. And then you get to that meeting, and to a person, to a flat, really, everyone just really was together, weren't they?
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yeah, it was good collective action, wasn't it?
Yeah, didn't get anywhere.
No.
I've been back to my old flat, although it was tough to get in at first because there's now a bloody great door with an intercom. So you have to press the button and wait for them to answer. How inconvenient. When I eventually got in, it was to meet Sandra, who now lives there with her 4 kids. I remember how you can hear everything, can't you?
Yes, yeah.
And,
you could even hear, sometimes you can hear the television and you're thinking, oh, that's on, you're forgetting like something could be on the other station.
Yeah.
You're thinking, oh my God, like EastEnders is on, let me turn it over, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's quite handy.
Yeah. But I do like it here. I mean, I get on with everybody around here. I mean, they could see me and say hi. There's a few people that you'd think, oh, you wouldn't see me talking to them, but I talk to them and say hello. I mean, I'm a very friendly person. The prostitutes sort of coming down here, and the drug dealers coming down here. So did they get the posh
prostitutes and junkies up that in?
We'd even talk to them as well. We'd
Yeah.
say hi to them and.
Oh no, there's nothing that exciting.
Oh no, yeah. To me, it was exciting. It was a Friday night. We had nothing to do. We used to sit out there, have a little drink, have a little smoke, and just see the punters going up and down. Yeah, it was quite funny.
So it didn't feel as if things had improved since I'd left, although there were some things that were familiar. Yeah, right in here. And this, I don't know how it happened, but I wonder if that's still a little bit of it, that a bit on the wall. There was this mould that went all over the wall, and eventually someone from the housing office did come round, and they just carried a little thing that, like one of these little things scientists have, that sort of goes bzzz, and it sort of sent the old needle a bit haywire as it went over this mould. I don't know if it was radioactive, this stuff. And then they just went off and they said, well, we'll be sending someone round. And then about 2 weeks later, someone else come round and they had a clipboard and they looked at it and made some notes and said, oh, that's dreadful, we'll send someone round. And this went on for 2 years and they never did anything.
So what did they do? Did they do nothing?
And in the end, I did say, I can't believe anyone normal would just go, bloody hell, there's mushrooms growing out your wall.
I had it.
And
yeah, I had it. But what they did after...
They put a false wall there, I think.
Yeah,
Ian.
that's what they did for me, yeah.
Another one?
Yeah, they put
It's going to be
false wall.
2 inches wide, this toilet, in a couple of years.
Yeah, and then they sort of put some sort of foamy stuff on the wall.
Right, so another false wall until eventually the whole room will disappear.
Yep.
There'd be ice on the inside of the windows and mould that actually looked quite artistic. And after months of pestering, they'd send someone round who'd say, condensation, that is. They could have gone to one of these mudslides that happens in places like Bangladesh where a whole village is washed away and gone, you had a kettle on in here.
There's bats in the belfry, the windows are jammed, the toilets ain't healthy, they don't give a damn.
Council estates are often derided as cauldrons of rottenness, but from meeting people like Sandra, you realise they're actually testimony to the human spirit, because she makes her condition seem so joyous she could be an estate agent. This snug property, with its charming shrinking toilet feature, overlooks some of South London's friendliest whores and crackheads. There clearly still is a community spirit, but now, instead of it being in collaboration with the government, it can only thrive in defiance of them. The estates are left to get poorer and poorer with fewer facilities, and instead of improving the conditions, the government's answer is now to slap antisocial behaviour orders on people.
I know this lawyer who said that one was given out to a lad for being sarcastic. He was prosecuted for being sarcastic. And then you think, a conversation between the police, whose one talent is being sarcastic, and someone being illegally sarcastic, that would go on forever, wouldn't it? Oh, think we're clever being sarcastic, do we? Ooh, I suppose you're going to give me a social order, and that's going to make the streets safe. Ooh, doing it again, like being in jail, do we? Oh, I do if I'm in there with your sparkling wit. It could go on for eternity, couldn't it?
Hey, Mr. Landlord, listen to me. Posing on the corner just as happy as you can be. This place you rented me, yes, it needs some repair.
The council never backed down to our rent strike, but in a way we did win. Because the councillors and a local MP and a police inspector did at least have to come and meet us all one day. And that was the first day that we all started to see each other, not as shadowy figures making strange unexplained noises, but as people with a reason to shout and laugh and sing and drill. And as the meeting went on, the neighbours grew in confidence and they started talking not just about the entry phone, but haranguing all these dignitaries about the damp and the rude housing office and the way they've been treated over all sorts of issues that had frustrated them for years, and now at last these officials had to listen. And on the way home from the meeting, the coughing man came up to me and whispered, after I was burgled, you didn't happen to see what happened to a suitcase of mine, did you?
I'll pay you $99 for a hole in the wall. Outside plumbing, and that ain't all. Yes, plenty of ventilation. Yes, where the wall